Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're so glad to welcome you as part of our community tonight. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and distributed live stream. By entering this virtual meeting room, you give your consent to be recorded and distributed by Vienna Live with Simeon Morrow and other third parties. If you prefer to not be recorded, please turn off your camera and microphone and or go to the Facebook Live video feed, the link to which I'll now place in the chat room. For a better experience, please turn off your microphone and set your video to gallery view. Tonight, our featured guest is Dr. Tatjana Rankovich, a pianist, faculty member at the Manes College of Music, and founder and director of the Music and More SummerFest, which takes place in Trebinje, Bosnia and Herzegovina. Tatjana is joined by Ionel Petroi, composer in residence at the Music and More SummerFest, and Jack Polo, a pianist and former student of Tatjana at Manes. Also joining us tonight is Dr. Lino Rivera, professor of music at St. Mary's College of California. Tatjana, welcome.
Thank you. So nice to be here and so nice to do the show.
Tatjana, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I was born in Belgrade, Serbia. It was the former Yugoslavia at the time of when I was born. And I came in this country some 40 years ago as a student at Juilliard, North Carolina School of the Arts first, and then Juilliard School. And so I made my life and my career in New York, and then I started to, play around and get the gigs, as we say, and record several CDs. I got into a lot of premiering a lot of American works and contemporary works. And then some years later, I met Ionel, who was at the time living in Paris. And so we've been together here in New York, and I teach at Manes College. I founded the festival, and we'll talk about that as we move through the show.
Okay. Ionel, welcome.
Thank you, Simon. So I was born also in Serbia, and I was a student of Paris Conservatory in '83, and I stayed in Paris for 25 years before I moved to New York. Talking about my music career, I'm a pianist, a double bass performer, and of course, a composer.
Okay, Jack, welcome.
Thank you. My name's Jack Polo. I'm from Connecticut in the States, and I'm a pianist, and I studied with Tatjana for many years at Manes, and I also studied with Ionel. He was my theory teacher at Manes. And now I'm at Oberlin Conservatory, piano performance major there. And I've been to the festival twice, and I've also been to festivals with Tatjana in Italy, performing there. Tatjana trained me, as a pianist and as a life coach, really. And these two have really developed me as an artist and a person. So thrilled to be here.
Fantastic, welcome. So let's take a look right away at Tatjana performing Bach. Fantastic. So Tatjana, can you tell us, how did you get into music?
My mom was the one who introduced me, and everybody from her side in my family, they all played, sang. They were not, some professional musicians, but they all loved music. So that was my first introduction. And then I just loved it. That was my life. That was my world. And I always wanted to move on to discover new things. I was hungry for new knowledge, for new adventures, for new experiences. And that brought me to where I am today.
And tell us, did you study music professionally also in Serbia before coming to New York and North Carolina?
Yes, so I was a music student in Belgrade. I studied with a wonderful teacher, Arba Valdma, Estonian, who was at the time, he came from the Moscow Tchaikovsky Conservatory, and he taught me. He was my first teacher. Actually, Jack met him in Trebinje because he's also part of our faculty, and he's still strong and going and very enthusiastic about music and just a wonderful, wise person. And so I was very lucky to study with him, and he gave me this great, he encouraged my curiosity and knowledge about music. And then I graduated from the conservatory kind of young. I skipped some years, and in my music high school, Central High School, and the conservatory there. And then I went to one of the festivals in Switzerland, Tibor Varga Festival in Sion. And there I met my next teacher, who I studied with, Clifton Matthews, who was on the faculty, North Carolina School of the Arts. And he invited me to come. And since I really wanted to discover more and get this extra knowledge, I went to North Carolina. But 6 months later, I auditioned and came to New York and continued at Juilliard.
And tell us a little bit about the difference between the education there in what was the former Yugoslavia and then in the United States. We had a show a few weeks ago in which we featured some musicians working in the West who all came from Soviet schools of music, and they talked about how, in their estimation, the Soviet system was very successful and worked very well, and that today they struggle with dealing with students who are clearly not meant to pursue music as a profession, but they're not able to really guide them in, give them their best, in other words, because they're supposed to always give these people hope that they can succeed.
Yes, there is truth to so much that you said. And but Yugoslavia was kind of at that time, Yugoslavia, which is now Serbia, Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Macedonia, Slovenia, Montenegro. So there were six of these republics that were then split up in the 90s, as we may know. But it was sort of in between the West and the East. So it never belonged completely to the Soviet part of the world. And I remember as a young girl, we had, the Berlin Philharmonic came with Karajan and lots of American pianists, Andre Watts, James Tocco, Byron Janis, all these amazing Gina Bachauer, so I was exposed to both the West and the East, which was kind of the best sort of thing being in the middle. And we had a very, very rich musical life in Belgrade. And so my mom, again, was very, she was my tiger mom who took me, from one concert to another. And of course, I studied with a teacher who was Estonian from Moscow Conservatory. So I did follow this Russian system, which was very intense. So from a very young age, we had right away ear training and theory and piano, and it was all twice a week. And we followed this curriculum, which was quite strict and planned out, and you couldn't just be 12 years old and be paired to like into a class with other theory students. You know, you had to fall, if you were 12 and never had lessons before, in a way it was stricter. So in some ways, yes, it's sort of every kid who was 12 years old already played a certain repertoire that was expected, but at the same time, you know, it didn't give much freedom like in the States we have. You know, we a 10, 12-year-old talented kid can start studying and can be entering a school system and is able to, if he or she works hard, is able to achieve all the kind of lost material and is perhaps able to just move forward. So it's good and bad, both.
And Yunel, is that also your experience?
My experience, let's say, it's almost like Tatjana's. It was very strict, you know, program, let's say, curriculum. But going to Paris, so in '83, as I mentioned, in the composition class, master class, that I mean, master degree that I had in this time. So it was a little bit different. It was in reality the research of my musical composition language. So it was in reality very complementary for me, very, very rich. You know, let's say, way how to move forward as a composer.
Okay, so let's take a look at another video. This is Tatjana's doctoral thesis. She's performing Beethoven's Piano Concerto with Rutgers University musicians. Wow. So Tatjana, tell us about this. We have some applause from the audience, from the participants. So tell us, what was this doctoral project? What was this concert about? It doesn't look like a normal orchestra, I guess, or a normal concerto has the pianos in the back.
Right. It's not, it's my thesis. This was very interesting because I got my master's sort of early on. I had 2 bachelor's and master's by the age of 21. So I was sort of, and then I went on touring and playing, and I didn't even, at that time, it was like the 80s. So nobody really, performers didn't think about getting a doctorate degree. But then years later, you know, I sort of felt I really wanted to go back and study more and get good with writing and research and this kind of stuff. So I entered a doctoral program at Rutgers University, and I entered with totally a different idea of what my thesis would be. And I wanted to go into researching American composers, specifically the neo-romantic and neoclassical guys that I recorded and I performed, such as Nick Flagello and Giannini and Paul Creston and so forth. But somehow along the way, I met a professor, Douglas Johnson, who is a famous writer and a researcher, and he wrote many books, and one of the most important of his works is the Beethoven sketches. So he compiled all the Beethoven sketches, and you know, so thankfully, thanks to him, we have the knowledge of the years and compositions of Beethoven's and really the timeline of how everything went. And so he approached me, he heard me in a couple of concerts, and he approached me with this idea because he had just learned that there was a new research that came and a few books from noteworthy musicologist Hans von Putten from Berlin, and Jonathan Delmar, an English conductor, and Barry Cooper, a musicologist, British musicologist, and they all talked about these revisions that had been found in the manuscript of the Fourth Piano Concerto. So, and these revisions were attributed to Beethoven, and he apparently inputted these revisions. So in most likely, this was the concerto, the version of the Fourth Concerto that he premiered in 1808 in Vienna at this big concert. So I was very interested, and it kind of, even though Beethoven I loved and I played Beethoven, but it was, you know, I never thought of researching Beethoven, but it kind of went into, it sort of perfectly, you know, fitted my love for new knowledge, for discoveries, for premiering new works and presenting lesser known works and composers. So in this kind of situation, Beethoven was lesser known because the concerto was very unknown or pretty unknown. There were a couple of recordings. And so the chamber part of it was also found. There was a version done by by Alexander Pössinger, a violinist and a friend of Beethoven's and a friend of Prince Lobkowitz's, who was this famous mentor, great mentor of Beethoven's in Vienna. And he had his orchestra and his chamber ensemble. So in all probability, Beethoven, when he wrote these revisions, they also, you know, at the time they needed to perform these concertos, and you know, orchestras were perhaps not always available, and Pössinger had arranged it for piano quintet. Now, it was actually a viola quintet, so 2 violins, 2 violas, and a cello. And what you see here is I added a double bass because I thought it would be more interesting and it would add another sort of weight to the group. So it was we had a couple of rehearsals and off I went. And this was my doctoral presentation. And, I don't know if you know the concerto, you could hear that there are all these added trills and kind of crazy stuff going on. And in a way, I believe it's somehow more difficult because there's just a lot of more notes going on. And I think Beethoven just gave himself, went to town with all these additions. There are some 200 and over 200 editions mostly in the first movement. There was nothing in the second movement, and some alterations happen in the third movement as well. So.
Okay, wow. So Professor Lino Rivera of St. Mary's College of California has a question or comment. Hi, Lino.
Hello, Tatjana and Yonel. Hello again.
Hi, Lino.
Both here. Anyway, my question is with regards to this particular concerto. How significantly different is this particular version as opposed to the known version that we have? And actually, I did my doctoral dissertation on transcriptions. How significant? How much more difficult? How different is it from the published version that we all know?
So it's basically the structure is the same, but for instance, the difference is in whereas in the original, the version that we know, for instance, at the end of the exposition, there is that big long trill. Here, if you could hear it, Beethoven just kind of does all these skips and trills and left and right all over the keyboard. So it's it adds a more virtuosic, less kind of relaxed mode, which this concerto has a certain distinguished lyrical sort of feeling. Well, the alterations add they bring a little bit of a different temperament and different character, kind of almost like humorous. So but whether Beethoven in 808, I believe he played this version. So I don't know why those never entered the real publication. That's the enigma. So it is a little bit different. You wouldn't say, oh, it's a different concerto, but temperamentally, and if you really know the original concerto, you will sort of go, oh, what is that? It sort of sounds weird, so.
Okay, a follow-up question. In the spirit of improvisation, and we know that Beethoven was a great improviser, and Yonel, it's a composition. Did you add your own little improvisations on that, or did you stick with the written notes?
Interesting. I kind of did. Actually, there were two different alterations. So they were all sort of written in shorthand, and they were presented by Hans Werner Küten, a German musicologist, and Barry Cooper, a British musicologist. And they hate each other, or maybe I shouldn't say that here, but they're very competitive. And Barry Cooper believes that Beethoven just improvised and that's what he did, and he wrote it for this concert in 1808 that he premiered the concerto with the symphony orchestra then. Küten has a whole different theory that actually Beethoven wrote these alterations in collaboration with Pösinger, the violist and violinist at Prince Lobkowitz's castle, and that they kind of worked together in order to create a new chamber work. And Küten believes that this concerto is actually a chamber work, fourth concerto, but as a version for chamber ensemble and piano, and that these alterations should not be used for the concerto per se. So since they both wrote these in shorthand, I kind of had to figure it out what that was. And I took a little bit from here, a little bit from there. And maybe I did, I guess, while I played, perhaps if something was too difficult, then I changed it.
Okay, so let's now take a look at the music in More SummerFest. Here is the trailer. Wow. So Tatjana, tell us about the music in More SummerFest. So we know that doing the doctoral work on Beethoven wasn't enough for you, so you decided to found a music festival. Tell us why, and why in such a far away place, and tell us how do you know when founding and directing a music festival is right for you?
I mentioned in the very beginning of the show that I, as a young 17-year-old student, went to Sion, Switzerland to attend the Tibor Varga Festival. And ever since, I dreamed about having my own mountain town with beautiful stages and beautiful venues and wonderful students from all over the place, sharing languages and music and instruments and walking around and attending concerts and so forth. And over the years, I looked at when I went to play, like in Sicily in the 90s, I looked at the location, and then Montenegro in 2002 and Perugia in 2017. And then I taught, that's where I met Lino in Germany at Interharmony Festival. And we were there for a couple of years together, teaching and playing and performing. We'll hear our performance later on. And so in 2017, I sort of said, well, that's it. I have to really give my students something even better, something even more, and at that time in 2014, I started a concert series that had this sort of name, Music and More. And why more? Because the concert series was founded in a location in Tribeca in Manhattan. And it was sort of in this beautiful space underneath the City Hall restaurant that sort of had this spectacular room with the bar on one side and a stage on the other side that, it was a famous room during the Prohibition years ago. And of course, it was now a spectacular restaurant. And the chef, who I knew, said, "Oh, let's have a chamber concert series, and we'll serve dinner and drinks." And so that's how that's where I got the name Music and More. So for a year, it was a spectacular place and a venue. We got a fabulous New York Times review, and it was really going on and developing. And then as things happened, the building was sold, the restaurant closed. And then I moved the concert series to a place, Good Shepherd Church in Lincoln Center. However, the venue was not really Music and More. They didn't want us to serve drinks or food. And so I struggled. What is more? I brought a dance company. We had a fabulous event where the dancers and collaborated with this modern dance company. But at that time, then I went back to finishing my doctorate. And then after I did my doctorate, I said, this is it. Now I'm starting my own festival. So I thought of starting it in Pula, Istria, which is my grandfather's home place. But then, that didn't work out. And I was just, by chance having a coffee with a friend who owns a piano company in Belgrade. And she brought up Trebinje. And I said, what's there? Do they even have a music school? So she'd say, yes, So 2 months later, I was on the plane. I met her there. And I met with the director of the music school. I saw the town and, the mayor heard my vision, and they sort of came on board, and they were incredible. They've been amazingly supportive as the whole town, the audience. I've never met such an amazing audience. They love every moment of us making music. The place is hauntingly beautiful. It's a magical place in the southernmost part of Bosnia and Herzegovina. That's country, of course, with a difficult past. It's a Serbian part of the federation. That has 3 entities: Muslim, Croatian, Serbian. And it's very close to Dubrovnik. So it's about 19 miles. So we're very overlooking over the mountain. There is a coast, there is the Adriatic Sea. So it's a perfect place. And this scene that you've seen in the video, that's on top of this mountain with a church. Right, that's overlooking the city, and over where you see that red patch, that's where Dubrovnik is, and the Adriatic Sea. And you see the audience, every concert is totally packed. And they're like, it's quiet. Everybody's just in awe of music. And I could never imagine a better place. So
Tatjana, is this an amphitheater, a natural amphitheater? Is there, a lot of wind there, right? Or how do people get all the way up there? I don't imagine it's downtown.
Right, it's not. So downtown, you're looking, there is the river Trebinje, and the downtown is like, we're looking at the downtown. It looks like Rio de Janeiro, but it's actually a little town of Trebinje with 35,000 people. It's very safe, beautiful place. And it's an amphitheater, which is actually, there is a big church, Serbian Orthodox Church, and where a famous poet, Jovan Dučić, who was born in this town, and he was a diplomat, and he actually, towards the end of his life, he lived in the States, and he died in Indiana, but his body was brought back. That was his wish, his dying wish, to be buried on top of a mountain overlooking his town. So the whole town really carries his soul. It's a very poetic place. Poetry is all over the place. And so the church, I think you will see, maybe I think in another video, we will see this beautiful church. and it's one of the venues. Of course, we have guests, we have students. So this year the concert will happen between 1st and the 14th of August. Lino Rivera is one of our pianists and musicians, artist faculties, and we plan to be playing Bach for piano concerto, not at this location, but at another Colosseum, which is sort of half open, half closed. So there are incredible spots and locations, and the beauty of the festival is that we have some 8-9 concerts in these different locations. And we also this year will feature gastro festivals. So for guests of the festival, they will have a chance to learn some special recipes and to cook special Herzegovinian meals, and to also take wine tasting. And there's like wineries all over. It's a Mediterranean spot with all these mountains, so it's very special.
And Tatjana, before we move on to the composer in residence, Ionel Petroi, tell us, what is this special food? If you think of Trebinje or Bosnia and Herzegovina, what are we eating meat dishes or fish?
So, yes, both. They're very big on special veal and lamb and potatoes, and it's all done under the fire, open fire, in these special sort of medieval looking cookware. And then they have, the food is very earthy. They have also special things done under the fire, and kind of with grains and special beans, and they're trying to get a UNESCO status of some of these grains that were that date from like the medieval ages, because it's kind of it's an old country, and they like to preserve, they work very hard on preserving the tradition. It's a very traditional country. They also have the river that you saw on that picture and in the video. It's very rich with river bass. So, and there is a wonderful restaurant that's right on the river, and you get the freshest fish, and they basically, it's a Mediterranean kind of cooking where they just cook on the grill and use olive oil and spices, and also, you know, in the city of Trebinje, every day there is an open market that's very picturesque. And our opening exactly at noon, a concert is always featured at the open market, in between all these stands and ladies who come from their farms, and they sell vegetables and fruits and herbs and all kinds of things. And it's just a wonderful scene of earth, organic. It's all naturally organic. It's kind of like one of the last spots in the world, it seems to me, or, you know, but also a wonderful thing in the middle of this, just next to the market, there is a natural spring that there is a fountain. And the first thing that I like to do when I arrive is to go and drink water out of it.
Wow. Okay. Now going on to the composer in residence. This is by a composition Principitando by Ionel Petroi. Fantastic. Wow. So, Ian, now tell us about this composition. Tell us about your work at the Music and More SummerFest.
Just to start with this composition. So this composition was composed for a special event in Belgrade in 2012 for the International Cello Festival. And Tatjana and John Michel, the cello player, they played recently this piece. And maybe they will play again during the Music and More SummerFest, of course. So my let's say my presence with this festival is that I'm a composer, but also I'm on the faculty. So I'm also teaching composition, and this is my let's say my responsibility to sometimes to coordinate also between concerts, between faculties, and especially that Tatjana and myself very often we're the only persons who speak in both languages, Serbian and English. So let's say I have a multitask responsibility.
Wow. Okay.
But if I may add, he's also an amazing jazz pianist. And this past season, we added jazz piano, and he actually did a little jazz medley, and it was enormously successful.
Fantastic. Let's take another composition by Ionel Petroi. This is Dark Adagio. Wow, very dark indeed. So, Ionel, tell us, we hear even the echo from the amphitheater, I think, between the pizzicati. What's happening there?
Exactly. I think that it's a kind of feedback from the speakers, and it was a live recording with the television station from from Bosnia. And so I'm sorry for this kind of special effect, I can say, which in reality doesn't exist in the real performance. The idea was to have these chords, of course, with a little reverb, but not the echo. Yeah.
And tell us, what are you working on now? Can those two, Precipitando and Dark Adagio, can they kind of summarize the heart of your work, or does it change a lot? What are you working on now?
Let's say that actually I just finished one CD project. It was done in memory of my mother, who recently died, and it will be let's say on the Amazon or Pandora or Spotify, iTunes, very soon in the middle of the February. This is one thing. And the second thing, so I'm preparing something very important for me to compose a new opera inspired by a painter, a woman painter. I will not disclose much more today. It's a work in progress. We hope that it will be with the soloists, a big orchestra, and let's see. So it's a very important project for me.
Fantastic. So I'd like us to look at another video now of another composer. This is Lois Fierks, To Stare Astonished at the Sea. So Tatjana, so like you're saying about your Beethoven thesis, you like playing things that have not been played before. I don't imagine, I imagine that your thesis advisors were happy you didn't pick Lois Fierk's piece to do a dissertation about. But tell us, this new music, is that at the heart of this Music and More SummerFest?
Well, new music, this video was actually from a festival, Keys to the Future, in New York, and I really wanted to perform. This is a wonderful piece that actually goes on for a few more minutes, and you know, develops into very, very rich sounding. I mean, they're plucked keys, and the melody actually that comes out of all these sort of like wave-like ocean sounds. But I have premiered a lot of American works, and so this one was also one of those. And the Music and More SummerFest, we also like to present new works, not just of Yonel's, but there was a friend of ours, Eric Lundberg, composer, whose works we premiered last 2 years ago, and a few other composers that we always present, and some other colleagues brought their new works, and so it's always very nice. I feel like, you know, sort of like making dinner. You don't want to just serve one thing. You want to sort of start with this, continue with that, add a little bit of that. So different tastes and sounds is really what makes it all interesting. And I think people also listen to new works in a much better way, and with more openness when they also hear something that they recognize. So it's a mix and match, and that way they feel more secure, I think, because we also need to know how to present music programs to the audiences.
Okay, and another part of the, I believe, more in the Music and More is that you have young artists come, and maybe not necessarily to study, but to be presented alongside more mature artists. And correct me if I'm wrong, and that's where we bring Jack Polo in, your student. Let's have a look at him performing Schumann. Fantastic. Jack, so tell us a little bit about your experience at the Music and More SummerFest.
Well, as you've seen with all the concerts, it's really an opportunity to perform at the highest level, near a hospital and ambulances. You can get a sense, you know, coupled with the concerts, it's a very high stress but rewarding environment. As I was saying, you know, I've had the opportunity to conduct at the festival. I've had the opportunity to play with chamber orchestras in amphitheaters at just the most beautiful, beautiful setting. And it's really an environment for growth above all else. Tatjana's always thinking about the students above anything else, and just the professionals you meet from all over the globe and get to work with and trade scores with and stories with. I mean, it's eye-opening and developing, and to be exposed to so much culture in such an amazing environment as Trebinje. I mean, in the States, we're used to sizable, audiences for some classical concerts, and maybe, I guess, top shelf, classical events. But in Trebinje and in Herzegovina, I mean, there's so many young people, so many people of all kinds, coming to concerts, and the amphitheater was full, hundreds and hundreds of people, maybe 1,000, of people so excited about music, and kids, excited about music. And it's just, something I've never seen here. So
And
that's really
how special that you get the opportunity to see how things are done outside of Connecticut, which is
absolutely
fantastic. And Jack, so you also mentioned that Tatjana has been a kind of a life coach. Tell us a little bit about that. You seem like an extremely mature man already. So I'm thinking myself about calling Tatjana for some life coaching.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm not sure how much she charges per hour for life coaching, but you could take a piano lesson maybe. um, it's actually, I'm glad you asked me about that. We were talking a bit about, the differences between, the older Russian school and the more American school earlier. And I guess I'm sort of a perfect example of, a kid who wasn't prepared, who didn't have the training and upbringing and more strict academic regimen, and who worked extremely hard under Tatjana's tutelage to make something of myself. I mean, I didn't know, I'm 21 years old now, but at 15, when I started with Tatjana, I didn't know any scales. I didn't know music theory or sight read. It was wild. But with with this with the most dire circumstances came opportunity. Working with Tatjana, working with just the wealth of knowledge and compassion, and it was really a two-way street, like we say, between instruction and hard work, that led me to be able to practice 8 or 9 hour days, and develop and make audition programs, and you know going to festivals like this one, it was no small part of me being inspired to work as hard as I did. So
And Jack, so can I believe now that you're speaking to us, like you said, from a hospital. Now you're training to become a neuroscientist. We're very fortunate to have another already established neuroscientist, Dr. Jerome Davis, who's here with us. And
wow.
I don't know if he can turn on his microphone or not. He's still figuring out Zoom. He's a little bit old school. But
I'm
there he
there.
is.
Hi. I'm a neurosurgeon. Good luck to you.
Wow, thank you very much.
But I'm retired. You got a ways to go.
Yeah, not quite retired yet. Feel like it sometimes though.
So many
Sound good.
thanks.
You all sound very good. Waiting to hear our friend here, Lino, play the piano one day on this thing.
It's coming up. It's coming up in a second. So
Okay.
Jack, and to Dr. Davis, thank you very much on behalf of all of us for the important work that you're doing to keep us going in these hard times.
We try.
So let's take a look now at that video. Like we said, here's Lino and Tatjana performing Petrushka. Okay, the dynamic duo, fantastic. So Tatjana, maybe can we, as a final thought, would you be able to tell us what you see in the future? We've had a tough few years, and I imagine that you're going to keep going. Tell us what the future looks like to you.
Yes, I keep going. I have to keep going in order to feed myself. And so we are planning our next festival, 1st to 14th of August. Everybody is invited. Lino will be there, Yonel and John Michel, who you saw, the cellist, and Carrie Reckhoff, the violinist, and Dorian, the conductor from Germany. And so we'll hopefully have lots of students and a lot of wonderful events. And on top of that, maybe next time we have a show, I'll tell you more about another endeavor, which is me establishing a new Institute for Multimedia and Performing Arts, University of the United Nations, with headquarters in Belgrade, but also it will be in Croatia, in Macedonia, and Bosnia and Herzegovina. So we will encompass all this. It will sort of move around, and that's an interesting endeavor that I am sort of working on.
Wonderful. Look forward to it then. Look forward to the next show. So let's see how we can stay in touch with Tatjana. Here is music and more SummerFest.com. I'll put that in the chat room in a second. Here is all the information and how you can apply, how you can visit, hopefully something about the great food. And then we have here TatjanaRankovich.com. So people can reach out to you through the contact. Is that right, Tatjana?
Yes, absolutely.
Even about life coaching?
Even about anything. I'm very open.
Okay, great. So thank you so very much to Tatjana Rankovich. Thank you to Ionel Petroi and to Jack Polo.
Thank you.
Thank you, Simone.
So coming up next week, we have Patrick Asper's Coping with the Complex World. Human beings are funny creatures. We usually want what we don't have. Certainty is no exception. If we are certain of winning a match, we get bored and want more of a challenge. Then again, should we be uncertain about dominating our rivals, what would we not do to gain certainty? Future-oriented beings that we are, and who doesn't thoroughly enjoy a good bet, sociology has probably always set its sights on how humans have dealt with uncertainty. Indeed, Auguste Comte, one of the discipline's pioneers, saw the West's history of institutionalized knowledge production in that very light. First theology, then metaphysics, followed by positivity, and finally, science. The knowledge produced by all four institutions had, and still has, one end in sight: reducing uncertainty about the future. Professor Patrick Asper's chair of the Research Institute of Sociology at the University of St. Gallen, Switzerland, sees uncertainty as an incredible co-creation of humans living in a wild world, and asks how, and even whether, uncertainty can really be reduced. Oh yeah, and don't confuse uncertainty with that fancy word risk. Risk is already far too certain. Come welcome Patrick Asper's to our show, and he will share with us his forthcoming and sure to be seminal book, Uncertainty Reduction, Coping with a Complex World. As always, all information about upcoming shows may be found at www.simeonmoro.com. Once again, thank you to Tatjana Rankovich, to Ionel Petroi, Jack Polo, and Lino Rivera. Thank you to Agnieszka Rivole for her support of this show. Most of all, thanks to you, our participants who make it all worthwhile. From New York City, New York, New London, New Hampshire, and the Bay Area, California, goodbye. See you next Wednesday.